Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about some work that we're doing to bring together a global database of forest structural biodiversity traits using terrestrial laser scanning data. I wanted to start the talk with a look at a bunch of different variations on tree structure. And considering this in the context of biodiversity, we kind of want to think about what exactly is biodiversity. Does it mean many species? Does it mean many functional traits? And what is the medium that actually supports biodiversity? I would say that tree structure is one of the most important aspects of biodiversity, and tree structure itself is extremely diverse. If we consider all these different structures of trees, we can start to wonder, how do we actually quantify these structural traits of biodiversity? Well, typically, the way that we quantify structural traits of biodiversity are in pretty low dimensional variables. One example is tree height. We go into the field and we can measure the height of a tree. A two-dimensional variable might be the percent of canopy cover. But we know species interact in 3 dimensions with their habitat. And for that, we need to measure habitat using a technology that matches those 3 dimensions. And for this, we use terrestrial laser scanning. And now we're bringing together a global database of terrestrial laser scanning data to attempt to understand broad scale, global scale relationships with biodiversity. Here you can see just really the sample of terrestrial laser scanning plots that we have available in our global data set right now. And you can also see here a couple of the pictures from field sites that I visited myself collecting terrestrial laser scanning data. But the reason I want to show you all of this is to really give you a grasp of the variation in different climate conditions and forest types that we've actually captured with this terrestrial laser scanning data. Around 10 different biomes with multiple plots in each of these for around 1,000 terrestrial laser scanning plots in this database. And now really the next step is to grow this and fill in those gaps that we're missing in the current database. To do this, we're planning on opening this up to the community for their own submissions of metadata to tell us where exactly terrestrial laser scanning data exists now. To do this, we have a simple Google form where you submit your email and whether or not you have terrestrial laser scanning data. From that, you'll be signed up for an email list that is going to give you pretty infrequent updates about the status of this database, as well as a spreadsheet that you can use to submit your own metadata to tell us where the TLS data you've collected exists. On top of that, you'll get a link to a navigable map that Joan Armston has put together here. A really nice interactive map that you can use to understand and really interrogate some of this terrestrial laser scanning metadata, and it really serves an incredible purpose of telling you where it is and the quality of the data that exists there. Now, several people here I'm sure have seen a variation of this talk before, but the difference this time is that we actually wrote this database into a proposal specifically aimed at developing these biodiversity traits, and it was selected. So we're very pleased to announce that this database is now actually funded. We're very excited to actually put forth some effort in bringing this to the community in a more full-fledged manner. So what are these tree-level structural biodiversity traits that we're talking about? Well, here you can just see kind of an example of some of these traits that we're talking about, whether it be aspect ratio of individual tree crowns, crown density, the vertical profiles. For this project, we have detailed a number of different traits that we're intending on deriving at each one of these plot locations. Here you can see the suite of individual tree traits that we're planning on deriving, from top heaviness of an individual tree to crown area or branching angle of the individual tree. And we believe that this kind of suite of structural metrics will give us an idea of the diversity of that structure of individual trees that exists globally. So what can we actually learn from this kind of global database of 3D structural traits? And now I'm going to walk you through some preliminary analyses that we've done looking at size-dependent allocation strategies, structural evolutionary traits that we can kind of see in allometric scaling relationships, as well as the environmental controls on tree structure. Now, one of the first things that I'm going to show you is how we can look at the size-dependent allocation strategies of trees with this type of data set. So across all these different sites where we've derived QSMs, or quantitative structural models, we're looking at the distribution of volume of individual trees, but binned by their individual size class, so the diameter class. And one of the things that we can see is that these larger trees, so as trees increase in size, they have an increasing variation in their crown allocation. And we think this is some indication of increasing complexity in large trees. We're also looking at this at the species level. So we can actually now, on an individual species level, look at the kind of structural signature, the vertical distribution of volume of those individual species. And we can take this to kind of another level and use it to understand allometric scaling. So you can see here how individual species, we've fit allometric scaling coefficients that we've derived here, and just kind of ranked them to show how the individual species coefficient actually varies, and that's something that we're really hoping to look into more. Now, I had mentioned before that this data set covers a wide range of different types of environments. Now, what we can do with that is we can start to do these global analyses of the drivers of tree architecture. And to do that, we can derive a generalized global allometric model in which we can look at the residual variation and attempt to try to explain that with some environmental variable. And if we look at temperature, for instance, we can see in this case an increasing temperature leads to larger trees for a given diameter size, but only until a certain point. At a certain temperature threshold, we see this decreasing in size for a given diameter, which might be an indication of temperature limitation, and kind of dovetails nicely with some of the other research that we've done looking at how tree height and mortality risk interact during drought. One of the other things that we're doing is we're deriving plot level structural biodiversity traits. This is just one example of a recent variable depth and depth complexity that we've created that kind of captures an element of structural complexity in the forest canopy, and it's derived at an individual scan level. We found that there was a positive correlation between this complexity variable and plant species richness. So this is the type of thing that we're particularly interested in exploring, but at a global scale instead with this database. We also plan on using a new algorithm, TLS leaf, to derive leaf angle distributions in all of the different environments that we've captured with TLS. We believe that there's a significant amount of variation in leaf angle distribution with respect to different forest types and different climates. And we think that this method is going to allow us to really pull out those broad global scale variations in leaf angle distribution that will be really useful for understanding at a global scale, what drives something like leaf angle. So in summary, I think that an expanded global data set of terrestrial laser scanning data will first and foremost foster international collaboration. All of these different communities that are collecting terrestrial laser scanning data, institutions collecting data, this will give us the opportunity to come together to do something greater at a global scale. And kind of tying into that is just this idea that by us coming together, we'll be greater than, the sum of our parts in terms of the types of science questions that we can tackle. We can start to now do these global studies of single tree architecture. On top of that, we're going to be able to update allometric equations with this type of information, something that's really needed in the forest ecology community, as well as the carbon monitoring community, as well as improving Earth observation, calibration, and validation. This data set is unprecedented in terms of what it can offer from a calibration and validation perspective for future missions like biomass or current missions like JEDI. So if you have TLS data, please feel free to contribute. And if you would like to contribute, you can use this QR code to take you to the Google form, where all you'll have to do is put in your email and whether or not you have TLS data to contribute, and we will be in touch and tell you the status of the database. Thanks so much for your time.